Hello, Antifa. It's me, Ghazi, the Commander-in-Chief of the Black Hammer Organization. Land back. Land back. Land back. Land back. I heard you had some not so nice things to say about me. I heard you had so nice things to say about my hammers. I heard you had not so nice things to do to one of my members, one of my dear, dear members, an African Filipino mother that you doxed and thought you could get away with it, thought we were gonna back down, thought we were gonna take it. That's not gonna happen. You messed with the wrong one this time.
Hello, my hammers.
There's something about hearing the Joker say the word doxed that's very funny to me.
Hello, my dammers.
Yeah.
Do not share where I live. That's a violation.
I heard one of you people fucking doxed me again. I am this guy.
And we've done clown makeup. I don't know if Jake has, but
I've done clown makeup.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, Anders
We've all done clown makeup.
did it at our live show if anyone came.
Oh, they came.
God damn. I've watched this clip like 10 times since Alex showed it to me the other day. Something about this guy is so good. So fucking fascinating.
I think he wants to be a Netflix star, and that like he's getting, the word out there, and that they're going to send like a Netflix crew to film it.
Oh, he's like a front-facing camera guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Osama bin Laden was kind of a front-facing camera guy.
Yeah, literally.
All of these people they don't realize it, but they're basically working they're tending in that direction.
Would bin Laden have been on TikTok?
He would have loved it. You kidding me? TikTok. He's a terrorist.
I don't know if he had an internet connection. You know what they found? We didn't get to this on our bonus episode, but on his computer, which they confiscated, he had the movie Ants.
Coincidence.
To show to his kids. And he had a lot of pornography, and also had a Ron Paul speech. Because that was like kind of his victory, right? Was Ron Paul in a way. Like I remember that was the first time I heard, as an American, as a youth in America, someone standing up and saying like, maybe this isn't a good idea to just like, bomb and invade and interfere with another region of the world constantly.
I can't believe you saved this for a different episode.
I know. I forgot about it. You got to take notes, folks. Take better
Ron
notes.
Paul was Osama bin Laden's victory. I'll tell them next time.
Well, I mean, he didn't achieve. Ultimately, he failed because we did not leave the Middle East. It got worse, but it got people talking, and that's what matters. That's what he wanted to do, was force a discussion.
Start the conversation.
Yeah.
It starts here at Osama bin Laden's compound.
The only movie viewable inside of Hammer City is Ants.
Yeah.
It teaches how to be a worker, etc.
It's Woody Allen. I love him. He has, like, the funniest thing about the Hammer guy is that he is clearly improvising, because he's doing this thing where you start a sentence and you're not really sure how you're going to end it, where you're like, so I heard someone made something not nice about me. It's really, but he's got so much stage presence, it just still works.
He's a great performer. I bet he kind of reminds me of a Showtime dancer. You
think?
Kind of, yeah.
That just feels like a thing.
In trouble for saying that.
Yeah, that's racist.
That's just safe to say.
But the bravado and like the way his legs are placed reminds me of a Showtime dancer, like getting ready to announce that they're about to dance on the subway.
It's hammer time.
For just $5, you can support the arts.
Wait, maybe he sells nutcrackers, those Kool-Aid things full of liquor that you get on Coney Island. He's like, is anyone trying to get hammered because they have to raise money for this compound, I'm assuming. So they have to go around selling candy bars or something.
How are they? Oh, they're.
GoFundMe.
I think they're funded by Caucasians trying to like displace their guilt. They have like a ally price or something.
Let's establish for anyone listening. Do either of you guys know what this is really? Because I have a vague idea. I want to fucking research it and do an episode about it, but I had vaguely heard of this bizarre kind of
Pull up the GoFundMe. Pull up the
crypto-fascist.
GoFundMe.
People said they're like fascists. It's like a bunch of
They're
weird
anti-Semitic, yeah. But they were, I think, in Florida and tried to create a community in Florida, and I believe now it's in Colorado. But they've
The GoFundMe is down.
So Hammer City is a mythical thing that moves around, and they try to start. No, I'm asking.
No, I think they wanted to do Florida, and then
That's what I'm saying. They tried to make Hammer City in Florida. It didn't work. So their thing is they're trying to build Hammer City.
Yes, they're trying to build a city, and do it by raising money from people who want to assuage their guilt.
And what happens at the city?
Okay, so I have the
Organizing?
website up. I'm on blackhammer.org.
Okay.
Which is my homepage, so it was easy to get to. And they describe Hammer City. Hammer City is Black Hammer Organization's latest project, so it's very exciting. It's a city for people of all color to be free. There's jobs, housing, food, healthcare, no cops, no rent, no coronavirus, and no white people. Which does seem like it goes against item 1, but also like if it's Hammer City, baby.
Well, it goes against item 1. And it also goes against the Joker guy, who's their commander in chief. He's white.
Right, but if the Joker wanted to come in, he would find a way around it.
He's a black guy, but he has a white face because he's the Joker. I'm finding wild inconsistencies in the rules of Hammer City.
Well, you're not allowed to go, Jake, so don't try.
You could go. You could get. Well, I don't know how to enforce that.
It's ethnically ambiguous. I could go and I could say I'm half Mexican. It's complicated. My dad's mestizo. Alex doesn't understand this and calls me white all the time. It's really fucking weird.
Well,
I'm just saying, I think Hammer City, how chill do you think they are about it? Do you think they have any chill about this at all?
Honestly, this is we should test this to just test the theory.
See if you
race.
could get in.
Yeah. I should try to get into Hammer City.
There's a separate campaign to send Jake to Hammer City.
Well, it's interesting because the Nazis, and I am not comparing them to the Nazis, but they did do this where it was actually not as cut and dry with the sort of ethnic hat sorting. Like there were like people who were like part Jewish they'd be like, fine. It was very like case ad hoc.
Yeah.
And that's probably what it is here.
Well, it's probably because race is a social construct.
Right.
It's not real. And when you live on the line, it becomes clearly absurd.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make any sense,
Right. That's why, the classic, what are you question. Yeah.
It's a little screwed up.
Yeah. I'm going to go to Hammer City and debate race and ethnicity with the Joker guy.
What race is the Joker?
What I know what you're thinking. What race is this guy?
But like from the comics, like the Mark Hamill Joker in Batman the Animated Series, you don't see. I think his skin is permanently like that in that version anyway.
Well, the guy who becomes the Joker, the Arthur Fleck origin guy, is white. But what ethnicity? What is he?
Right, that's a good question. He could be part Portuguese.
You think he's a pork chop?
I'm saying Joaquin Phoenix has an olive complexion, so the Portuguese is a possibility.
I feel like in the comics he was like a redhead. I think he looked like you. He was
a greenhead. I mean, you mean but pre-accident?
I'm talking the human that becomes the Joker. I'm not racially analyzing what the Joker end product technically is because I think it's its own race.
You know what would be funny if they I think it's good that Marvel and DC actually was at the forefront of this. Just gonna put that out there, making more heroes of color. But what if they had just like done it only with villains and all of the heroes had remained white and just that's something that could have happened easily.
A little awkward.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to read that. I'm just saying it would be bad and funny.
No, it'd be kind of cool because the villains are the cool people.
That's true. Maybe that could,
I
hope this doesn't make your comic book awkward.
God damn, dude. Someone needs to become Batman and fight the Hammer City Joker.
You know what?
This is the last thing we need, actually. I feel like this happens every time there's some kind of like communist settlement somewhere. There's Batmans showing up, and then they look terrible in real life.
You know what? It would be interesting.
You doxed me. Honestly, Batman's main thing is his fear of getting doxed.
Right. That's true. Yeah, that's all every superhero.
Yeah.
Don't tell them which cave.
God damn it. God damn it. A lot of people eat cum. It's normal.
I'm a performer. I'm always hiding.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like X-Men, right? It's in sort of the crude analogy is the mutants were sort of the integration, or the X-Men were integrationists, and Magneto was a separatist. And it would be interesting to see if Black Hammer shows up in the comics soon, if there's something like that. I know that Ta-Nehisi Coates is writing Superman, and Superman's going to be black soon.
Whoa, okay, that is a portal
exciting.
into this possible new reality.
Yeah.
The X-Men were freaks.
We're sending Ta-Nehisi Coates to fight the Black Hammer guy.
I don't want to put that on him. I should. It's not his responsibility, but it would be an interesting premise for a comic.
All right. Well, if anyone knows the Black Hammer Joker guy, please ask him if he will come on this show and explain how his fascist, whatever the fuck thing compound works, what race he thinks I am, and whether he'll hang out with us.
Let's actually submit you. You send the email and see what they say.
I mean, really, it might finally solve like a lot of racial discussions in America if we just collectively go to the Black Hammer thing and then use it as a litmus test of like, are Italians technically white? I don't know.
This is going to be from an entertainment perspective, though. Like, Jake's going to get in the Black Hammers, and everybody's going to be like, how'd you book that? How do I get in the Black Hammers? I can't get any stage time. I'm not in the Black Hammers.
We send Rachel Dolezal.
Oh, that would be a shit show. It's fun. In D.C., there are a lot of black nationalists, and they will hand out stuff to other black people. And I thought about once, I was on a corner, like just asking them, like, hey, I have a friend who's African-American. Can I, like, pass it along to him? But I didn't do it.
Oh, that way you can see their sweet, sweet literature?
Yeah, or I just wanted to see what the reaction would be. I think it would probably still be no, but worth a shot. I should have done it.
What do you think?
That's the thing.
Go ahead.
You have the same kind of twisted spirit. I feel like they should let you into this mountain compound, but you're the last one they're going to let in, Anders.
Me? Yeah. I would not get.
Maybe they will think that you're in clown makeup already.
Yeah. It's like I'm too white for it to not be unnatural.
Yeah. And then, like, at one point, they're all showering, and they're like, why isn't your makeup coming off? And then they realize, like, we've been infiltrated.
Oh, wait.
This man's not a clown.
We were all showering at the city-mandated shower time, all Black Hammers do, and we're looking at Anders. Oh, wow. What an introduction.
God damn, man. Come on the show, Joker guy. All right. Well, we're going to have to put a pin in all of that and get on to what we're actually talking about today, which is the podcast that I'm assuming we've already been canceled for doing, which is a podcast about cancel culture, the thing that I hate to talk about all the time, and yet we're doing it. Think of it as a once and for all argument.
Right. It's going to be, solved.
Despite Jake's reputation on the internet in some places as having created it in the first place. Sort of a Frankenstein's monster situation.
We've asked Seth Simons to come on the show and defend his creation, cancel culture. Writer Ben Burgis, podcaster, person in our sphere, wrote a book called Canceling Comedians While the World Burns, and it kind of had a meta journey. I think honestly what happened is he wrote the book and he titled that, and then in between writing it and publishing it, the sort of like consensus on what that means shifted a little bit against his favor, which is funny, but also sorry. Like, a lot of people have. I think what happens, honestly, a lot of comedians chimed in and went, "Hey, actually, I think this like anti-cancel culture witch hunt is kind of bullshit." And now we have more of a discourse happening around it, and it's interesting. And we are comedians, and everything's fine. Guy wrote a book.
Right.
He's doing publicity for it, and or promo or whatever. And basically, how this happened is that they pitched it to us, and I said, as long as I can say what I think about it, And Ben's a cool guy, so he totally heard us out, and we had a little discussion about something that we might not agree 100% about. And
that's okay. It's important, I think, to have self-criticism on the left, and to not, totally need to agree with people on 100% of everything. That's, I think, an unhealthy habit. And, it's a complicated discussion. One of the arguments I've heard against sort of discussing cancel culture is like, oh, well, it means so many different things to different people. That's true. That's also true of socialism or liberalism or neoliberalism or like almost anything that's worth talking about. So that's, I think, it's still a good discussion, important discussion to have. Not ad nauseum, right? We're not gonna. This isn't gonna be our main shtick, right?
No, we're doing it all this week. That way we can stop. Because
right. We uncanceled Osama bin Laden for the bonus.
yeah. Forgot about that. You got to listen to the bonus to cancel us for being nice to Osama bin Laden.
There's a lot of steps. It's a multi-point process.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get into it, eh?
Hey!
Hit it.
Am I canceled? Someone tried to cancel me. Okay.
Lock them into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
All right, everyone, it is now happening. Once and for all, I will say, once and for all, we are going to discuss the unending discourse thing known as cancel culture.
We're going to solve it.
We're going to solve it today. That way everyone on the internet can shut the fuck up about it. This is something that touches all of us. I know it's near and dear to all of our lives as people who post on the internet, and it sort of creeps back into the conversation every week or so. And so, I thought about not doing an episode about it for that reason. And the more I thought about it, the reason I think I wanted to do this is because maybe if we talk about it and just have it all out and figure it out, then we can talk about something else. So in order to do so, we're going to do a little bit of something interesting today, which we don't usually do. We don't usually do talking heads yelling at each other, Is
that the plan? We're going to yell at each other today?
No, I'm not planning on yelling, but I am very passionate.
No, we're going to get a Talking Heads concert album where David Byrne yells at the audience.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's what we do here. No. I don't. It's weird. I don't want to premise this like we're going to have a debate. I am only laying that out there in case I'm like, this is more for me. I don't want anyone to think. I don't want any of my children who listen to this show to think Daddy's angry. I just have a lot of opinions about this sort of stuff, and so this will be interesting. I don't know. So without further ado, our guest today is Jacobin columnist, author of Give Them an Argument, and author of the book we'll be talking about, Canceling Comedians While the World Burns, Ben Burgis. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Jack.
Thanks for coming on. So Yeah, I read your book this week. It was rather enjoyable. It was, it was about things that I think about all the time, which I think made it a pretty easy read. Go ahead and tell my audience like what prompted you to write this book, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So I think that the book really, even though the opinions that it expresses are ones that are sort of mentioned in the first book about some of the the ways that the left goes about things in ways that I don't like, and makes itself less appealing. Then I think in between I've gotten a lot more frustrated about those things, basically because of a bunch of different incidents that that maybe we can that maybe we can talk about as we go on. Some that I mentioned in the book, some that I don't mention in the book. But the big claim that I want to make in the book is that, of course, there's cancel culture, which is an imperfect term for what it's supposed to describe, but my general policy is that when at all possible, instead of fighting about which words to use to describe things, I'd like to prefer to fight about the things themselves, is what I would think of, right, as what people now call cancel culture, before they'd call out culture in 2016 maybe, is roughly a cluster of cultural and technological trends, all of which I think are basically symptoms of our late capitalist hellscape, where we're all incredibly atomized. People often feel most connected to others online. The for-profit social media platforms have all the same incentives to make their product more addictive that Marlboro and Philip Morris do. Most people work in non-unionized workplaces, so doxing has a special edge, with at-will employment, and a lot of other things that we could talk about that I think go into this. And I think that is a general phenomenon that infects the entire political spectrum. And we could talk all day about right-wing and centrist manifestations of it. But what I'm primarily interested in the book is what I think is wrong with the left, because I want the left to win, and I'm concerned that some of the stuff makes it less likely. So some of that has to do with the particular way that these trends have infected my part of the political spectrum and how they play out there. Some of it has to do with sort of hysteria about minor political differences among people who basically agree. Some of it has to do with certain ways that people seem to prioritize being performatively radical in various directions over what I would view as trying to contribute to useful political project. And one of the big claims that I make in the book about how all this ties together, why this isn't just like Ben grumbles about several different subjects, over the course of the book, although maybe that would be the more critical, way to look at it, is that I think that I would see all of these things as, what I call in the book, pathologies of powerlessness, that I think at least, I don't want to claim that all this stuff is monocausal. I'm sure you can trace different parts of the problem back to different sources, but I think at least one part of all of these problems is that the serious left, political perspectives to the left of liberalism, have been kind of in deep exile from any form of real world power for a long time, certainly in societies that I know best, like the US and the UK, between the decline of the labor movement, the fact that even like good, honorable social democrats like Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn spent most of their lives as extremely marginal backbenchers, and anything more radical than that was totally out in the outer darkness, during the era that's kind of defined by that Margaret Thatcher Tina thing. There is no alternative. And I think under those circumstances, it is natural, and I think this has to a certain extent happened, that a lot of people with radical left political commitments end up thinking of those commitments in practice less as a serious project to change the material world, and more as a kind of symbolic performance of moral commitment, a symbolic stand against the many injustices of the world. And my concern is that when you see it that way, that can very easily shade into spending a lot of time interrogating other people's individual moral commitment. So you end up with this kind of counterproductive moralism, where you spend a lot of time evaluating people's individual character, and also that you stop worrying as much as you should about what appeals to the broadest possible mass of people to advance that that political program. So that's the stuff. I mean, we can argue about how widespread some of these trends are. Certainly, a lot of this is a matter of degree, and it varies wildly. But it's what I was concerned about in the book, and what I was trying to push back against in the book.
Yeah, well, right off the bat, first of all, I have to compliment you because you were so articulate about these things that are so amorphous and people are often just railing at, and people are so angry about and can't really put into such succinct words. So I really enjoyed reading your book because I was like, okay, this is the argument like laid out. This is what it is, I guess for me, I agree with a lot of what you're diagnosing, although I think I'm going to push back against sort of the idea that this qualifies as a collective phenomenon, because what I find myself saying to people a lot of the times is, you're talking about 10 different fucking things, and they just require different arguments. Like the at-will employment thing it's a real problem, but when you're talking about that, you're talking about capitalism. That is the underlying problem there, and not a social phenomenon, in my opinion. And I guess for me, the way I see it, though, that my main kind of disagreement, I think, with the entire premise of what's going on here is even if if we kind of agree that all these things are happening, I just don't understand the call to action, because if the entire point of looking at and diagnosing all this stuff is to say, look, it looks bad sometimes when we're too, cringy and weird on the internet, or when we get characterized a certain way. How do we fix that? I mean, there doesn't really seem to be a cohesive, we're not in a political party. There's not a, one apparatus that we all communicate through and organize through. And it has all these, I guess, would strike me as unfixable problems. So like, in the second chapter of your book, you talk about the DSA convention that Tucker Carlson, showed his audience, and he cherry-picked and showed the most cringy parts of it. Everyone remembers the, don't clap because it's offensive to deaf people stuff or whatever. And we could stop doing that. I'm sure, you could go around and make a point of this at DSA organizing. But to me, it strikes me as kind of a fallacy, because your enemy is going to hold you to the standard of the worst thing you've ever done, no matter what. Sure. And we are a lot of people, so they will find something cringe to define us all by. It kind of reminds me of like when the Democrats are running, in the primaries and stuff, and they go, should Bernie Sanders call himself a socialist? You go, they called fucking Joe Biden a socialist. Right. Like, they're going to call you that no matter what, So to me, I have more of a positivist outlook on this sort of stuff, where I'm like, let's not be defined by the worst thing about us. They're going to do that anyway. I think we get people on our side by, because of the best thing about us. And it's been my experience also with like, even people that like listen to this podcast, I've met like on the road and stuff. They're terribly sincere and don't seem to be here for, for negativity, like for us taking down and dunking on some other person as much as they just like us, which that is a thing that people do in the left, and that is a way to garner an audience. So that isn't to say that that's not a useful tactic, but I guess I don't know. I mean, what's the plan? Like, what is this all implying? I guess is what I'm asking. Like, how would you propose to fix all this stuff?
Sure. By the way, I do think it's kind of funny to me. I mean, I guess maybe this just shows what says something about the toxic waters that I spend way too much time wading in. That that there was all the setup at the beginning about how we normally don't do this debate stuff, but maybe we're going to start yelling at each other. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I do way too much stuff like that. I've debated Stefan.
We'll call you a beta at some point.
Yeah, I know. We'll call you Ben Bourgeois.
I do like coming on here, and it's like, all right, it's gonna be a lot. Okay, here's some mild, thoughtful disagreements.
No,
Be an extreme glass houses situation for anyone here to be throwing the beta word around.
Right. I will have you know I have a girlfriend, so.
Okay, all right. Very
yes, we know you have one girlfriend and you're 30. This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't know why I imagined this was going to be like tough crowd or something. I don't know.
Well, it feels like that's what the internet does. It's like it magnifies what are sometimes legitimate disagreements, but it blows them way out of proportion. And, those discussions are important to have. Like, I think self-criticism is important on the left.
And if we were having this argument over Twitter, this could elevate into an actual, like, fuck you, Ben thing really quick because of the anonymity.
Right.
But now we're...
No, right, sure. Plus, you're looking at 280-character snippets of what somebody's said, and all of the incentives are to just sort of take the like your immediate gut reaction to it and run with it. Like that's the so like one of my it's a very small thing but one of my all-time favorite examples is last summer. Wendell Potter, who for any of your listeners who don't know who this guy is, he used to be a health insurance executive. And he'd lobby Congress and stuff in that capacity.
Oh no, I don't want to hear anything else. After you say that, I'm done.
And I think like 10 years ago or something, he had a come to Jesus moment about it, and he's actually dedicated his life since then, since leaving the industry, to campaigning for single payer. And last summer, he tweeted something that was like a very typical Wendell Potter tweet. If you follow him, it's the kind of thing he does all the time, where he said, the fact that people don't know how much single payer would help us during the pandemic is a sign of how people believed the lies that I told, when I was a health insurance executive. And somebody who, it's not important, who I think he was like a Marvel Comics writer or something, some like 10,000 follower kind of account.
Sure.
Quote tweeted that and said, "Oh my God, the fucking piece of shit actually admitted it," and got like 75,000 likes before enough people pointed out to him who Wendell Potter was that he took it down. And what always struck me about that is that it would have taken 3 seconds to click on Wendell Potter's name on the top of that tweet and see his bio and see like organizations with the phrase single payer in them in the bio. But if, the point is not like to, morally condemn this person for not doing that, although also, do better. But just to think about the incentives, the feedback loops that are built into platforms like Twitter, because why spend the 3 seconds checking out who this guy is when you get that immediate endorphin rush of likes and retweets for throwing that first stone. So I think that the platforms themselves are a problem. And going back to one of the first things you said, I think that I think it's totally fair to say that if we're talking about like cancel culture as broader as a broader phenomenon, there are a lot of different causes of it that require very different solutions. And I think that's totally right. And in fact, I think, to some extent it's depressing news because, if I'm, part of what worries me is the ways that these cultural trends impact the political culture of the left, then it's really bad news if some of these trends require solutions that would like involve the left winning politically, since there's a vicious circle there that so in order to do things like rebuild the labor movement, end at-will employment, maybe nationalize Twitter, so it's no longer has the same profit incentives that it does. But I think that my claim, at least, would be that those things, even if they do, come from different sources and are to a certain extent, different discussions, do contribute to a broader problem. And so that's one claim. And then the other claim is that the way in which some of this stuff is caught on in the left is a symptom of a more general problem with the left that it's worth being aware of. That that if we do have this tendency to reduce politics to a kind of moral performance that manifests in all of those ways, it's worth being aware of. Now, the criticism you just made that I think is the most fair, I think is I mean, not that anything you said was unfair, but that I think is like the most cutting is okay. What's the plan? How are we going to deal with it? And I'm certainly not going to pretend that I have like, okay, here's the thing that what I can do, left podcasts as a whole can do, DSA even can do that's going to solve the problem. I think, as you say, we don't have some sort of party where we have a decision-making apparatus where we can do things that would help with this, which of course is a problem in itself and a much larger discussion. But I also do want to push back a little bit about the idea that, people are going to find something to cherry pick, or they'll represent us in the worst light anyway. So therefore, and maybe this is a little bit of a caricature of what you're saying, you can clarify, but therefore, like, we shouldn't worry too much about it. And I'll even say, like, even in terms of the metaphor, with Democrats and elections, I've never, okay, actually, I shouldn't say I've never, because I'm sure there have been times when I've nodded along with it or like retweeted people saying it, but right now, am not crazy about the way of defending using the socialist label, where you just say, oh, well, whatever, they'll call us socialists anyway. I know that's like a very popular line, and like I said, I'm sure it's one that I've repeated in the past. But on reflection, I think that that's maybe the wrong way to defend it. I think the right way to defend it is that you're saying something important when you call yourself a socialist, something that's worth saying. So even if there might be some political cost to it, maybe the cost is worthwhile. And I think that it is a little dangerous to go from, okay, we have enemies who are going to try to cherry pick things and are going to try to put everything in the worst possible light, which is certainly a true premise. Therefore, let's not worry about it, and let's not like make an effort to stop giving them so much ammunition. I think we should make an effort to try to stop giving them so much ammunition. Like the fact that there are these people who are DSA organizers who were announcing those rules or, intervening on the convention floor in that way, knowing that this isn't like some Breitbart thing where they send, where like Tucker Carlson sent in someone with a hidden camera, that they were streaming this to the world. And I think it is a really bad sign that people were acting this way, even though they knew that. And I think that maybe is a symptom of what I'm talking about. And I also think that it is a problem that surely out of like the 1,500 people or whatever who are hearing, who are sitting there on the floor, and hearing this list of rules, no clapping, no loud noises, no strong sense in the chill out room, etc., that nobody is saying anything. And I understand why nobody's saying anything, because you don't become a socialist in order to argue with crazy people about whether it's okay to clap. You become one because you want to do something about capitalism and imperialism and police violence and all of those things. And so you have much bigger fish to fry, and this seems like a really annoying, diversion. And I totally get that. But I also think that part of the problem and part of why I wrote the book is that if the only people who are talking about this stuff are the ones who are the least appealing faces of the left, then that becomes what people associate with us. And so I guess I would see the goal of writing the book of sort of making the argument, saying, hey, here's the problem, here's why it's a problem, here's where I think it comes from, even if there's no sort of neat and tidy solution attached to it. As one, I do think that, as you said about listeners and all that stuff, lots of people, including lots of people who might act in some of the ways being criticized in the book, are extremely earnest people who want to build a movement and might just never have thought about it in those terms. And it might actually get some people to do better. I wouldn't rule that out. The other thing is that even if it doesn't, even if for the sake of argument, nobody is convinced by anything in the book, which I think is too pessimistic. But even if that's the case, I would still argue that it's a useful thing to do. And I know this like touches right on the thing that like a lot of people, say, oh, you're like, complaining about canceling comedians while the world burns. But I think it's a useful exercise for for a couple reasons, even beyond convincing people to act differently. And I know this has been a really long answer, but this will be the end of it. That one of those is just to kind of keep up morale, for people who are often really frustrated and worn down by this, of whom I think there are legion on the contemporary left. And the other one is that I think, at least planting a flag for, hey, not only could you be a leftist without doing some of this stuff, or even if you have a problem with some of this stuff, but you should have a problem with some of this stuff in order to be a leftist because it undermines our political goals, then I think that sends a useful signal to persuadable people who might see some of the things that are being described in the book and say, ugh, I don't want to join that club, right? Like that seems like incredibly unappealing. But then if you can say, hey, check it out, right? Check out that there is clearly a group of people who are on the left, who are socialists, who can't stand this stuff any more than I can. Then I hope at least it makes it a little bit easier to come around.
Well, I did kind of want to clarify something because this is something I've been thinking about. And this, to be clear, this is not an argument I've seen you make or suggest, but there's a tweet going around a little while ago where someone said, third hand, that there's a quote unquote just working class person, not political person, who came to a DSA meeting, and then
they were like alienated by pronouns or something.
Exactly, yeah. And that's something I think of because I think it's obviously good to respect people's pronouns. I know, Natalie Wynn has said, she is a woman, and it's frustrating for her to constantly have to announce that. But, how do you strike that balance of, actually respecting these things and doing things that are good, right? Respecting people's pronouns while not alienating people who are not politicized? Because, the majority of people probably don't do that yet, but part of me really thinks that society as a whole is kind of going in that direction. So if the left is kind of on the vanguard of that, is it in some way sort of just unavoidable that's going to turn people off or
I think in some ways that when we get stuck on stuff like this, it's unfair that we are tasking ourselves with having to fix all of society's problems in order to have a left movement. However, I will concede that they certainly attempt to make it that way because the people we're up against have normalcy on their side. And so that anyone within the realm of normalcy who is just an American liberal, and I mean that in the classical sense, either fucking ideology in this country, is not held to the standard of everyone in their group because they're not challenging anything. So it's unfair that we're in this situation, but I mean, I guess it is kind of true. They will literally use anything against us. And that's just how power works, right? Right.
Well, I guess the point I'm getting at is there's got to be some way to strike a balance where we are, very clear about not tolerating racism or homophobia or any bigotry, but at the same time we're a little more relaxed when it comes to people making an accidentally misgendering somebody, or I think I don't want to put that on trans people, obviously, to have to they can react any way they want, but as a collective,
Well, I think that's true, but another thing I want to kind of push back about on this is you always hear this argument that, and this is very popular in the on Twitter and in the post left or whatever the fuck you want to call that whole thing, is that we're alienating the lumpen proletariat and that every working class guy is Archie Bunker or whatever. But if we understand what the working class means to be this huge group of people, it also is the person who benefits from the pronoun thing.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes I think you kind of get into this plus one, minus one kind of back of the napkin math when you're trying to work this out. And you're like, well, if I alienated the Archie Bunker guy, but I got the trans woman into the DSA, and if there's no way to get them both, isn't that still kind of a win? Because, I mean, I've met people who I have a friend who's a comic who, during 2016, all these people were saying, oh, you guys got to stop being Bernie bros. Stop being so angry and mean on the internet and stuff. You're making us look bad. It was one of those fucking arguments. It was a tone policing thing. And then I met this comic who used to be a conservative. And then he, at one point, he told me that he got socialism pilled. And he, read all these books and stuff. And I was joking with him about it one night, late at night, just drinking shit after a show. And he was like, honestly, I thought you guys were pussies. And then I heard like all the jokes, and he liked that we were mean on the internet. You know what I mean? So like, one of the things that you could make an argument is turning people off is like turning some other person on, and I don't know how to quantify this in a way that says which one is, you know, to use the math, you know, the philosophy math you use in your book or whatever. Which one of these has a bigger what's the word I'm looking for?
Utility. Sure. Yeah. No, I get that, and I think I'm sure that you're right that sometimes there are trade-offs that are just like inevitable, right? You know, you want to get everybody, but you know, as Mick Jagger so wisely teaches us, you know, you can't always get what you want. You know, you might have to. So I mean, I think, and I'm also a little skeptical, which is funny because I actually do have like a real story that somebody told me that's sort of like the thing that was going around, but not exactly. But I do tend to think when I see that, like I take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Like it's a little bit too, it's a little bit too pat, right? You know, that like, that the worker came and, you know, they didn't like the pronoun thing. But I think that, you know, you mentioned Natalie Wynn, and that is actually also an interesting thing for the trade-offs right there, right? Because even within the trans community, somebody like Natalie, who is a binary passing trans person, like her point was that it's kind of frustrating that she can go to pre-pandemic, obviously, she can go to a sports bar in North Carolina and be missed and mammed all night with no problem, and then she goes to like lefty meetings where it's 15 cis people in her, and everybody's going around saying their pronouns, and she can kind of, feel the people, like swiveling over, right? It's like, right? This is for you.
It's funny.
And it's like a little bit, it's a little bit innately uncomfortable. But of course, other people who are non-binary or non-passing might have good reasons to feel differently about it. In this particular case, I will offer the kind of pat solution that I said earlier I don't necessarily have for a lot of this stuff, which is that the one piece of practical advice I would actually give if you're running a meeting on this is just give everybody name tags. If they want to write down their pronouns on there, they can do that, and and that way that they have their preferences expressed. If they feel like expressing
what if they can't read, Ben? Did you ever think about that? Someone yelling that at you at a DSA convention.
yeah.
Dyslexic comrade caucus.
Yeah, right. And I think, and I guess I would also just say, like, okay, can we always please everybody? Of course not. But can we make some sort of broad judgments, without sort of having an Archie Bunker oversimplified idea of what the working class is, which, to be fair, I don't think most people with these concerns have, although also when you get into people who are like the kind of like weirdo, insufferable hipsters who would call themselves post-left, maybe a few of them do. I tend to think that a lot of those people, my friend Adam Proctor has this nice phrase about, it's the basement of the vampire's castle, people who are like the mirror image of the worst, sort of most insufferable woke scold, but their whole thing is like somehow left or post-left anti-wokeness. Or I don't know, something, I'm sure they'll nitpick that characterization, but it's like they're opposed to the first group of people, but they're doing all the same stuff. And some of that does spill over into really stupid directions. I also tend to think we're talking about like 10 people, but I think that broadly speaking, taking that out of consideration, right? Like, because of course I never want to say nobody says X, right? Because you can always find somebody, right? Like there's always somebody who says it. There's this, it's like that Cicero line about how there's no opinion so absurd that some philosopher has not defended it. Well, look, there's definitely no opinion so absurd that nobody on Reddit has defended it. But it is. But I think broadly speaking, taking that out of the equation, I think that I do think that, sure, of course, you need to strike that balance, that actual bigotry, right, should be off limits. Like if somebody, as our, Michael Brooks would always say, right, if somebody says, hey, I like you, I want to support you, I want to be part of your movement, but I really want to be able to discriminate against trans people, and how about that, right? That's a very short conversation. But I do think that it is still the case that most people who exist outside of certain political subcultures, and I mean most people, like I really mean that. I don't mean like most like white male people or anything like that. I think most people of any race, sexuality, gender identity, any of that stuff outside of certain political subcultures see something like nobody's allowed to clap, see something like somebody like, for that matter, like the Joe Rogan thing where Rogan has said some bad stuff, right? Like I'm certainly not going to defend everything that he's ever said, but I do tend to think that the number of people who, from various backgrounds, who basically think that he's a likable guy, vastly outnumber, the number of people who have a giant problem with him, and that when you get stuff like people saying, oh, Bernie shouldn't have accepted or embraced or touted. That was a word I saw used a lot during that discussion. Touted the endorsement of this problematic person, Joe Rogan, because we only want the support of people who don't have any bad takes or whatever. Like I think that's something. I think that's the kind of thing that I think, without claiming to have perfect information, that we have like some surveys of how many people are going to be alienated by this, how many people are going to be alienated by that. I think we can broadly say that acting like that isn't a good look and isn't helpful for assembling kind of the biggest possible coalition of people to actually win.
Yeah, liberals always use words like that, like touted. They're always like, my favorite one is glorify. Everything is like, how dare you glorify?
Which is so dramatic,
Joker.
Too, like glorifying. You're attributing glory to it. Like usually when you're accused of glorifying things, you're just saying you kind of like them.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever glorified anything in my life. That seems very excessive.
Joe Rogan has a big listenership. He should be glorified for doing that. It's pretty impressive.
I guess to me, it's just when you make arguments like, there's more people that like Joe Rogan than are, really, really resentful and worked up about him. I think you're right, but I think that also kind of means something that conflicts with the argument here, which is that there aren't that many people that are this cringe. They're just outliers. And to me, I want to kind of lay out two things that I think are kind of interesting and relevant here. One is the powerlessness thing. I think you're right about this. I've been thinking about this a lot, and if you're a listener, you like my shit, you've heard me on 3 other podcasts talking about this, I apologize. It's just on my mind lately, but I've been thinking a lot about this thing. They talk about an Adam Curtis documentary about Edward Bernays, the PR guy, the guy who invented the field of PR or whatever, who's a psychology guy, is a nephew of Sigmund Freud. He did this thing where in the 1950s, if you bought a box of powdered cake mix at the supermarket when we were like setting up suburban Fallout America or whatever, you would take it home and the instructions were pour the powder in a bowl, mix it with water, put it in the oven, you have a cake. And they never sold. People didn't like it, right?
Right.
So what they did in order to fix this problem,
you have to have some like eggs and stuff so you feel like you're cooking.
They unpowdered the egg, and now the instructions when you get one of those cake mixes are to fucking break an egg, right? And so what does this tell us? This tells us that we live in a world in which we have no meaning and we have no power, so we have to make up shit to trick ourselves into thinking that we have agency and meaning in all these things. And I think that is probably what's happening in a lot of these things that you're identifying with tankies being too cringe on the internet and with the DSA being, a Portlandia sketch, essentially. However, I think that expands all the way out like a fucking kaleidoscope into us talking about those people. I think this is also kind of meaningless. And the reason I say this is because, and the reason I think I wanted to kind of have this entire conversation is because, the title of your book is sympathetic to comedians, but I'm a comedian. And in my experience as a comedian,
you know that you don't deserve any sympathy.
Yeah. Well, kind of, because what I've noticed with social media recently is I think that people are frustrated with it because it came about very quickly, too quickly. I'm a bit of an ANCOM guy. I think it came about too fast for what we've been evolved to deal with, right? Our lizard brain can't handle dealing with millions of people. It's designed to, evolved to deal with, 100 people or whatever. And so this thing came about and it's fucking with us. But I have a unique perspective because I've been traveling around trying to tell jokes to people in bars and shit for fucking 15 years. And I think I was aware before my friends who are experiencing this now, how much people actually are horrible and how much they actually kind of will say dirty, nasty, cringy fucking things. Because I hang out at the bar after I've done a show and I hear people and it's exactly like a fucking Twitter fight or a YouTube comment section. It's alarming. It's stuff you don't want to hear, but I'm kind of used to it. And so when people, I think, empathize with comedians for being canceled, what they're seeing usually is like a famous rich person like Dave Chappelle or Bill Burr who has lived a life without as much feedback as they're currently getting. And those people are now successful and they're famous. And so they had a fucking like a rude awakening one day when social media popped up and the people that they usually hide from in their green room are now like able to comment directly at them. And so they're talking about, being persecuted in ways that I'm sorry, they're just not. Like Dave Chappelle is the most famous working comedian right now. And he's always talking about being canceled. And it's like, in what way? Like you're fucking fine, And I think that what's going on there is you're seeing something that was already there, and all of what we're doing right now is trying to grapple with that and assign some meaning to it. And it's unfortunately it's not that it should be happening or shouldn't be happening. It's that it is happening. It just is. This is the new reality, and I think that we have a choice here to sort of evolve or sink into the tar pit. And I guess I can't help but be reminded of someone like Bill Cosby, another comedian, when, he used to say, pull your damn pants up, to people. And it was, you ask yourself, what is going on here? Why is this guy so concerned with respectability? Well, he's an old man. I think that and also everything else he did aside, that has nothing to do with what I'm saying here. But but I think that
we know what happened. We know what he did.
Yeah,
you don't not know what he did. That's just one thing that happened.
The tendency to become alarmed at these outliers and be afraid that we're being defined by them, I think, also comes from a place of powerlessness. And I think it's a little bit of like in the case of Cosby, I'd call it cane shaking. Like I would tell someone like that, like this new reality it's here to stay and you're just going to have to fucking deal with it. And I don't think it means what you think it means, that young, black guys in the 90s were sagging their pants and stuff like that. Everything's going to be okay.
Can I expand on this thought for a second? Because I just want to get this out there in the front. This is my least favorite topic of all time.
Yeah.
It just I don't even it just like Ben was saying earlier, there is a bit when you get into politics and you're excited to do socialism where when you're at the DSA convention, the clapping to irritate the hearing impaired people thing just is not important to you because you want to talk about what the convention's about or whatever. But that said, regardless of whether or not whoever is getting, whether Dave Chappelle deserves to be taken down or if it's an actual takedown or if he shouldn't be attacked like that or not, the problem I always have with these cancel culture debates is I can't wrap my mind around the material basis for them. When you look at when the conservatives are upset about something, you'll see this on Fox News all the time. You'll have these cultural attacks that are, Tucker Carlson will be on TV talking about the degradation of the wet ass pussy. The wet ass pussy came on TV and it made my child upset with me and I'm losing her values every day. And I guess what Ben was saying earlier, that the cancel culture stuff does fill the same role as politics in a way that I think is bad, but it also does seem innately tied in with our situation. And by tying your horse to the wagon of trying to stop the cancel culture from happening, I feel like it puts you in the same place as the Fox News anchor, which is just like, cut it out. Stop listening to rap. Like there's nothing strategically you can do about it.
Yeah, that's kind of the main thing I think about this is there isn't anything you can do. It's just, it sucks that it's real. And the what most people do when they're confronted with this stuff is run away from it and just like, people always say, oh, just log off and just don't use social media and stuff like that. And it's like, well, that's fine if you're talking about your personal life, but if we are trying to build a movement, then yeah, we have to use the internet, and it just sucks. It just sucks. It's a fucking reality. But I don't know. I mean, listen, I have been canceled like insane amounts of times. I've never had it affect me in a way where I lost a job, thankfully, because I'm scrappy and I fucking get by with all sorts of weird grifts and stuff, and do this show, And I've never had.
Oh my god! This fucking piece of shit actually admitted it. He's a grifter.
Oh my god, he admitted. Anders is gonna fire you.
Yeah.
Well, a grifter in the economic way. We actually are con artists, and
like literally are working grifts.
Right.
Yeah,
we're doing sting stuff.
Like he's sending Nigerian prince emails to people and stuff like that.
Right. If only I was sending those and not getting.
Yeah, you should be sending those. Anders got by one of those.
It was a phone call. Yeah.
It is far more sophisticated.
Very extremely sophisticated.
I mean, I certainly don't want to. I certainly don't want to be, shaking my cane and doing. Or being Bill Cosby, even in a non-rapey sense, like just old.
But believe me, I did not mean to call you Bill Cosby.
It just seems like sometimes you're the same as Bill Cosby, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
But what I'm saying, the reason I'm talking about this is because, people fucking hate me, and I had to get a new phone number this year because my fucking phone number got leaked by people on the internet. All of my private life is on display. I've had fucking all my nudes are just all out there and shit. It's insane. People hate me so much, and I fucking log onto this app, and it's sometimes like I want to tell you like, oh, it's no big deal as a kind of an anti-cancel culture person, but that's not true. It fucking hurts. It hurts my feelings. Like I hate it.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm more of a depressive swing than a manic one, it really fucking bothers me.
Yeah.
But it's just people being mean. It's not like I still exist in spite of all this stuff. And actually, what I think, my grand theory of all this stuff from my own personal experience is the reason that it ultimately doesn't bother me is because I am engaged in kind of a meaningful activity in making this podcast and doing DSA stuff. And so I don't have an empty life where eventually that sort of stuff could fill and become the meaning, which I think is how you become a reactionary of some sort, or like a weird Basement of the Vampire Castle person, where that becoming obsessed with that just becomes the end all be all of
and there can be a really bad cycle where people do either just become some Basement of the Vampire Castle weirdo, or like in some cases actually like drift to the right politically because I see this all the time. If somebody's if the people that you used to associate with have kind of excommunicated you over nonsense, then you're going to start hanging out with whoever will still have you. And then people being people, over the course of time, you're going to start to be influenced, by their way of seeing the world. I think it'd probably be contrary to the spirit of the enterprise to name anybody I think that might be happening to, but like it happens. And then I guess, so I certainly don't disagree with, with everything that you're saying, and I think especially going back to the first part about comedy, that I think there are at least like 3 reasons you could have a problem with sort of like weird moralistic denunciations of comedians of the sort that you often see online and sometimes also offline. And ranking them from like the least important to the most important. I think the least important reason to have a problem with it is because you think that this is like a important social injustice that that we should be very concerned for the welfare of the comedian. Now, sometimes right? I mean, because obviously most people who do comedy are not, Dave Chappelle. They're just like people who are like scraping by or losing money, by doing it in a sort of attempt to put together some sort of incredibly precarious career like everybody else is doing, in different forms. And so sometimes, like if somebody suffers undeserved, reputational damage, that could have job consequences and other things. But I think that overall, I'd say that that's probably the least important, the least important reason. And I'm certainly not worried in any larger sense about Dave Chappelle. But then I think the second reason, which is by far less important than the third one, but I think it is I think it's not nothing, right? Like it's something that if we're going to talk about it, it's worth at least taking a second on and then moving on, is that I think that if you actually like comedy, I think that some of these culture war dynamics are actually really bad for it as a form of entertainment. And, maybe, just to be pretentious about it, sometimes potentially art, because you end up getting this sort of insufferable woke pseudo comedy that seems to be designed to elicit that clapter rather than laughter, and then you also get this equally insufferable anti-woke comedy where even good specials you have to suffer through 20 minutes of stale repetitive stuff about how nobody can tell a joke, and that's bad. That's bad for it too. So that's one thing, right? I think that it's just the whole thing, I think, is just kind of bad for comedy. And since I had a chapter on comedy, I noted that because it just seems like, hey, this is a place to note it. Sure. But then what's more, getting more into the kind of meat of the book, the larger themes. I think that my biggest problem with it, obviously, yeah, if we're interested in comedy per se, I think moralistic scolds of any kind make for bad art critics, because they tend to be really simplistic. But I'm also especially concerned when people who are part of my corner of the political spectrum and who are, for as you said earlier, have to kind of hold themselves to different standards, inevitably, present themselves as moralistic scolds, because I think it's a really bad look, and I think it's also kind of a really revealing thing. And I also, by the way, I think that one of the most legitimate criticisms of the the title of the book is to say, hey, but wait a second, you're picking as the representative example for all of the nonsense that's being criticized in the book, canceling comedians, but hold on, isn't that more like a I say left in the subtitle, right? Isn't that more of a lib thing? And, fair enough, it is. Although I would also argue that with a lot of the stuff I'm talking about in the book, a lot of these things might originate in liberalism, but that doesn't mean that the left is immune from it. I think oftentimes people with left-wing commitments, still are sort of reflexively have all the attitudes, that kind of the liberal side of the culture wars have, and there's a lot of bleed over in practice. And I think that American progressives often have a really weird attitude towards comedy that I think that the denunciation side, don't start raising money for Dave Chappelle. He'll be okay. But also, it is really weird to see even some of the Slate and Salon reviews of Dave Chappelle specials. Never mind, all of the internet stuff, because some of it is just sort of strange and moralistic and seems to be missing the point to such an extent that you wonder if people know that they're watching something that's intended.
Yeah, I mean, as Americans, we have a terrible relationship with art right now, but I think it's symptomatic of our society. It's not the cause of it. I mean, if you look at a Rotten Tomato.
I certainly agree with that. Right, it's a symptom, not a cause. I think it's maybe a particularly sort of lurid and ridiculous symptom. But then I also think the other half of the argument I make on the in the comedy chapter is that I think that that's sort of the flip side of this bizarre tendency by a lot of American progressives to, all right, whatever, I'll use the word, glorify comedy.
How dare you?
in ways that also don't really make sense. So obvious examples of that, from the lib side would be things like the Jon Stewart rally to restore sanity, or things like exactly how excited liberals got in 2016 by that John Oliver Drumpf thing. It's almost like there's this weird way that in the collective liberal imagination, like comedy is really politically important, or has the potential, at least to be really politically important. And I think that's kind of the subtext when people get like really like angry about like Dave Chappelle or whatever, in ways that's like, I don't know, like.
Yeah, they think it's more important than it is. They think it's dangerous because they think it's powerful to begin with, and it's not. It's the end result of a bunch of shit happening, not the cause. So I mean, I think, right. Yeah, exactly. Culture is downstream from politics, but that's, but I think that there is a kind of like progressive Breitbartism, that thinks that politics is downstream from culture, and that like if you have that somebody like a stand-up comedian has the potential to be this like bold, politically important truth teller who's going to be like the metaphor I used in the book is going to be like the equivalent of like the jester who's going to be the only person who can tell the king that the peasants are starving, that they'll be like the canary in the coal mine, for some really important political thing. And then like, so somebody, they think, oh, they're not playing that role, that they're doing something bad, then.
The only thing I wanted to interject with is that as polarizing as it is, like perceiving of comedians right now, it has to feel weirder doing comedy right now. At least since the last year, at least. I mean, not to project onto Jake and Anders, but the title of your book is what it feels like. Like, do we need any more relationship observations as like police murders triple over the summer months? These are questions you ask yourself. And then at a certain point, you have to ask like where this stuff is coming from. Like, I think the impetus to do to like find somebody who can kind of make a moral hierarchy that we can all rely on is part and parcel of this phenomenon we're all experiencing, where like, okay, so clearly society does not work anymore. Like, it is not illegal for a 50-year-old to date an 18-year-old, but you are canceled if you're a 50-year-old and you're dating an 18-year-old. That's like a new law the internet made. It's to just like reshape the world as you want it. And a
really weird one too, by the way, just to interject on that. Like I see this thing that like suddenly a lot of people seem to have decided, and they present this as if this were just like this common sense thing. Everybody knows that there's like a precise like mathematical formula for which adults are allowed to date each other. That's like, okay, you have to like
half plus 8. Half plus 8 is how I always.
That's the classic. I thought it was half plus 7.
You would think that.
And we don't even agree on the formula. So like, we got to get together on this and have some kind of central body decide exactly who's allowed to go out with who, or else we're going to have a big problem here.
This is my point. When you're Jon Favreau in Swingers, you get to make a mathematic formula that we can all use to swing. But now in such political chaos, where can you turn? Like, there are definitely people with 35-year age gaps who are in like weird, loving, healthy relationships we should all aspire to copy. And then like also like almost semi-slavery relationships that we should send you off to an island for being in. And it doesn't feel like you can put those under the same flag at all.
Wait, is that what happened with the Gates, Bill and Melinda?
Don't send those people to an island. Historically, it's worked out pretty badly. They just build a temple.
They don't get to pick the island. This is exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't have a rule, we just have to make it up as we go.
Although that's kind of a funny example. There's an essay that Leon Trotsky wrote in, I think, 1934. You can find online. It's called like A Letter to American Workers, where he's speculating about how communist revolution in the United States would play out. And a lot of it, some of it's like weird, that like he says that I guess Trotsky had a big problem with gum chewing, and he says like, my prediction is within a year of communism, you'll stop chewing gum. But some of it is... But some of it is about how being this like this wealthy, developed country, then things can play out in a much less like violent and chaotic way, than they did in Russia. And along those lines, he says that if the new like revolutionary government is concerned enough about not like sort of going to war with small farmers and stuff and letting a socialist economy, absorb more stuff around the edges in a more gradual way, then maybe it could win over everybody except for some recalcitrant millionaires. And then he suggests that we could even like give the recalcitrant millionaires some like island that they could party on, and like they could just like have that be their own thing.
I think islands are a political necessity we need to start talking about, because they do exist and we can send people there.
Well, that actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because something you talk a bit about in the book is sort of this like historicism. I don't know if that's the right term for it, but I'm curious if you feel like this is unique to today or the left over since like post the Cold War. But this is a problem I keep running into, where people will even say like, yes, the conditions now are different from 100 years ago in Russia. But then their politics are completely pegged to that. And it's just like there's this wall, but people just can't get over the fact that, like, yeah, maybe living in a bourgeois democracy in the 21st century, you might have a different strategic orientation than Lenin and Trotsky. Like, what do you think the reason for that is? And has that, like, always been the case? Have leftists always sort of searched for, windmills to chase, or, like, people from different eras to sort of, like, cosplay as?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly on the last part of the question, I think that's probably true to a certain extent. I mean, there's Karl Marx talked about how the new revolution always clothes itself in the costumes of the old one. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something like that. When he's talking about like 19th century potentially socialist revolutionary movements, sort of using this like all this like symbolism from like the Jacobins, in the 1790s. Which, I'll also acknowledge the irony of me bringing up that example, because I write for a magazine called Jacobin. But in any case, I think that in some sense, like, I'm sure part of that is perennial, that people want to find historical antecedents to help make sense of whatever they're doing. And some of those are going to be anachronistic and weird, and that I think is going to be a thing to some extent. Always, but I do think it's worse now, and I think that the reason it's worse now goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that the left like has been wandering around in the outer darkness for so long that we are just now starting, and I don't want to even assume that it's going to continue, because there have been some bad signs, but we're just now starting to get to a point where like being a socialist in the United States is somewhat pegged to things that are organically happening politically right now in the United States. Because before that, pretty much I think we could date it back to like Bernie Sanders, like running for president the first time, starting in 2015. Before that, most socialists were going to be like kind of like antiquarian book nerds. Which is still true to some extent, and I'm certainly not exempting myself. But I think is true to a wildly greater extent, that, people would get their perspective on radical politics and how to think about it, like not primarily from things going on in the class struggle in the society they actually live in, but from reading about past, revolutions, reading the works of past radical theorists from oftentimes very different countries and very different times. And I'm not saying that nobody should read that stuff. I certainly would never want to say that. But I do think that there is a lot of copy and pasting, because if you basically, if you remember the 90s, what that was like, and it was bad, right? Like I am old enough that I can remember that, and I was a teenager then, but I was already interested in radical politics, and back then, basically, if you were a leftist, if you had those inclinations, and you actually wanted to participate in real politics to some extent, your options were that either in practice you become a cheerleader for like Democrats, just like regular Democrats, or you sort of sit in the corner angrily, rereading the collected works of Marx and Engels. which was always my preference out of those two. And so, a lot of this is probably self-criticism. But then like that leads to some dangerous stuff, because if you end up just sort of copying and pasting from those past, revolutionary thinkers or whatever, then you end up with a lot of stuff that doesn't really make sense in the time and place that you're in. Like you end up saying, well, you can't do things in Democratic Party primaries because that's a bourgeois party, and you need your own separate party, and so you should be trying to do that. And I'm not saying there's nothing to that. I'm sure we could have I don't even know what everybody here's positions is on that. Maybe we could have like a long and interesting discussion about it.
We're pseudo-left sheepdogs, or I am anyway. Yeah,
right,
I'm a Passadist. I believe in the dolphins.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, so I mean, if at least that's a plan, right? I mean, like when they're like telepathic dolphins, like help, like then eventually, right? There's some way that we could actually actualize this. But I would argue, right, as a pseudo left sheepdog, that it's that like a lot of that's based on some thoughts about how parties work that really comes out of a European context and makes very little sense in the United States, where like what we call political parties are just very different creatures in practice. And then I think it also comes up with a lot of the anti-fascist stuff, because people sort of do this thing where they like read Trotsky talking about like fighting fascists in the streets, and they kind of orient around that, and they end up like spending their time kind of like picking street fights with some weird like far right cosplayers who have like 20 members, and it's something. I guess all this is just to say that, like, I'm not going to say that it's a totally unique problem to right now, because I'm sure that's not true. But I think that given that the left is coming out of this period where just to be interested in leftism was probably primarily a historical and theoretical thing rather than a practical political thing, I think that right now it's probably worse than it used to be.
Right. Well, it's funny you bring up the the 90s and people flocking to the Democratic Party, because I remember seeing recently someone posted DSA's endorsements, and we forgot it was an organization in the 90s, from like 96 or something, and it was just like they just were rushing to give anyone an endorsement who like voted against NAFTA or like was kind of skeptical of NAFTA. And now I think there's a lot of progress. We've changed. Like, we're not going to them, they're coming to us, and we have standards that people have to meet before we endorse them. But on the Antifa point, I know you say in the book that you're not prepared to totally, dismiss Antifa altogether. But the point is taken about it is different from, the 20s and 30s, where the fascism was a much more predominant force. But do you agree with the premise that now it is still important to disrupt and prevent fascists from organizing, or else they can possibly like metastasize?
Yeah, I don't think I do. I think, I think that it's sort of worth keeping an eye on, because when circumstances change, they could play that role. There's certainly other places in the world today where like actual like fascist street gangs are a major problem. Certainly like Brazil or Greece, with Golden Dawn, would be obvious examples. So, I'm not prepared to sit here and say that like there's absolutely no possibility that the United States could evolve in that direction. In which case, you certainly would need to fight fire with fire. I'm not convinced that sort of that going out and having like brawls with like tiny organizations to stop them from organizing is going to be a net benefit right now. I think that if we were in a situation where there was a real danger that they were going to metastasize into a major threat, like Brazil, where they have like the actual like right-wing paramilitary gangs that like will control territory just like drug gangs do, or maybe in some cases are involved in stuff like that, like that I'm not convinced that if that happened, like if historical conditions were such that something like that were going to have to happen here, then the left kind of doing the sorts of things that it does right now would actually prevent that metastasization. And I'm also a little worried about having this kind of street violence that is often like, you know, it's often not great, right? Like, I mean, people do, you know, like I mean, there's a balance, because I don't want to, like, you know, I don't want to give undue credence to like right-wing hysteria about it, you know, which is often just factually wrong. But I also think that a lot of people, things that people do in the name of Antifa are not good, and that they could certainly. They certainly don't. They're certainly not an advertisement, you know, for the left that I would want. And I do think, I mean, maybe I'm just being like way too much of a squishy Menshevik about this. That like I do think that we'd be better off if whatever sort of Antifa kinds of activities we had were much more organized and disciplined and defensive, right? So like they could be like the. You know, they could sort of be the guardian angels for protests, you know, making sure that, you know, that you didn't have any, you know, fascists or, you know, right-wing weirdos who attacked anybody, you know, but they wouldn't like sort of go out in the way that some Antifa activists, it seems to me, sometimes seem to do, sort of like looking to start a fight so you can get like sort of extreme examples like the attack on Andy Ngo, who is certainly not an individual who I feel any sympathy for, but I also think that's like very not good for that to happen.
Well, I mean, the whole thrust of the argument you're making in the book kind of seems to be this, like, the net loss sort of thing of the back of the napkin math you use in the book sort of, you know, works out, hey, you know, there's utility and then there's something working against you and all these things. And I think that's, like, I don't know. I don't know if I really agree with you here in the case of Antifa, especially because what Antifa is like not an organization. Right. It's a practice. It's really complicated, and anyone who puts on a black hoodie and goes out and does anything can be Antifa. They can call themselves Antifa, what they're doing. Someone else can just take a picture of you and then say this is Antifa or whatever. So there's no way to like organize this in a way where you have any control over optics. And I think the best way to deal with it is, you know, our friend Andy from Antifada, who had my mixer earlier, he read a really great piece that we talked about on the show called the Anti-Antifa, where he sort of worked out, you know, philosophically, like the argument. And I think that eventually what he sort of arrived at, if I remember correctly, is just that a lot of what people are getting wrong about arguing against this is that they're operating on the premise that this is the revolution entirely encapsulated in an action, when it is just, it's what is the word? It's
defensive.
It's defensive, and it's also like something doesn't have to be. I was a really good $10 word I'm missing here, but something doesn't have to be sufficient.
Glorification.
Sufficient in order to be good. It is just a piece of the operation or whatever. And also another thing I got to tell you, something that just kept ringing in my head while I was reading this book is, as a comedian, and I'm going to keep saying that like I'm a goddamn liberal because it is an identity that I.
Speaking as a comedian.
Speaking as a marginalized comedian who, what does that mean? I do improv or something? I don't know. So, but honestly, as a fucking comic, as somebody who thinks in comedic terms all the time, I think I fucking have a laser in my head for caricatures of people and for building resentment and scapegoating and stuff like that, because you often do that in comedy, and I've noticed it happen. This translates to politics, and it is a thing that speaks to people and evokes a reaction from them in the same way that when you're on stage and you're just trying to get people riled up about something, you know, this skill, there's a reason that so many fucking alt-right people come out of comedies. They develop this skill by ginning up resentment about liberals and shit like that, and woke people and the PC police and stuff in comedy circles, and that translates really easily to the week after fucking Charlottesville happened. All of this seemingly out of nowhere, overnight, all of this shit that used this amorphous figure of Antifa cropped up, and it became very useful for them. And I just don't, I don't see a point in fighting it because you can't define the parameters of this fucking situation. And I guess I worry it becomes a little hypocritical when we're worried about the respectability of people that are fighting fascists and we're apologizing for Andy Ngo because he's technically a journalist. To me, this seems like it's too apologetic to like institutions like academia and journalism that, to me, as a dirtbag, don't fucking matter. I don't care if Andy Ngo is technically a journalist. That doesn't mean I'm not going to throw a fucking milkshake in his face. I think throwing milkshakes at Andy Ngo is hilarious, and I think
I think if all that had happened to him was that a milkshake had been thrown at him, that would be a lot easier to find funny because it's a symbolic, it's a that itself is kind of a comic gesture, but I think that...
But he's like a soccer player. You hit him with a milkshake and he fucking goes, oh my God, all my bones have been broken.
Okay. But to be fair, in this particular example, he wasn't just hit by a milkshake, right? He was also like hit by fists. And,
but he's the biggest asshole in the world. Like you can't... someone is going to kick that guy's ass and they're going to just say it's Antifa.
I'm not going to argue that he's not an asshole, but I do think that that beating up a like unarmed and extremely physically unassuming person is not great.
But who did that? He went to a fucking thing that was like potentially going to break out into a riot. It's just people out in the mob. Like you're letting Tucker Carlson define the person that beat up Andy Ngo as someone who's like organizes with us or whatever, but no one has any control over it. It's just a random.
Yeah, and I would feel better about that argument if I hadn't seen so many people who I know in left media, and maybe I'm making an equivalent mistake on a meta level there. I'm thinking that matters more than it does, which is maybe a professional danger of doing this. But I think I saw way too many people I knew in left media for comfort, sort of saying like, oh good, I'm glad that happened, or sort of being very defensive about it in ways that to my mind kind of missed the point, like even saying things like oh, this is like the best thing that that could have happened to him, which I never understood why that wasn't taken to the next step, which is, hey, if this is the best thing that could have ever happened to him, why do him the favor?
But these people figure out ways to martyr themselves all the time. Like there's literally, we're talking about pacifism at this point. I mean, we would literally have to get.
So why, like, if they're looking for ways to martyr themselves, like, why make it easier for them? Why give them that gift?
Because reality is subjective, and we're living in hypernormalization, and anyone that wants to make themselves a martyr by being canceled by the woke mob can just make it up. The factual reality of this stuff does not matter to the people who eat that stuff up. The people who are like bloodthirsty and they just love the idea of it. It happens to me all the time.
Yeah, I mean, this might be one of the biggest, like, sort of big picture, disagreements that that I think that. It's certainly true, that if you're in a war that is, among other things, a propaganda war, a rhetorical war, and an optics war, which is, I think, inevitably, what a lot of political persuasion, a lot of political organizing just is going to be. I think that's inescapable. Then I think it's a real mistake to go from they're going to lie. They're going to make stuff up. They're going to try to present whatever does happen in the worst possible light, all of which is true, to therefore, like, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's not a problem to make it super easy for them and give them golden material. Like, because I think that the first part's right, but I do think it's a useful instinct to resist the second part.
I don't think there's like a gradient nature to this where like the people that actually represent us politically, yeah, they should be careful about this sort of stuff. Bernie Sanders should not throw a milkshake at someone, regardless of how funny I think that would
Bernie
be.
Sanders threw a milkshake at someone, that'd be so hilarious that I would defend that.
They could have just, in the task force negotiation they did with Biden, they could have just thrown away all the policies and just let us see that, him throwing a milkshake at Biden.
He's just hitting him with silly string on the debate stage. this is problematic. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Well, see how I waited until all the way to the end here to actually get into yelling? Yeah, I fuck, man. These are huge problems that we might not be able to figure out today. But, I respect where you're coming from, though, for sure.
I appreciate that.
Does anyone have anything else we want to really get to? I know we're at like about a little over an hour. We should probably wrap up here.
I think that's good. We're probably going to get yelled at online for this.
That's all right. It's very lucrative. That's how we make money.
This is going to be as good for you as getting beaten up was for
exactly.
Brandon.
Yeah.
So we're all, But I don't actually hate you like I hate Andy Dose. I'm cool with it.
Me neither, man. In fact, I think I might even call you friend. This would have been funny if we had just faked it and just made a bloodthirsty, angry, controversial podcast and then became millionaires off of it because we got canceled.
It's not too late.
It's not too late. Let's redo it. All right. Well, anyway, Ben, thank you very much. Please let my listeners know where they can find you and where they can read your work and your new book.
Yeah. So you can find me at benburgis.com as a sort of, probably easier than going to find everything else a la carte. And then as far as the book, it is available at all of the usual, book places. But if you don't feel like buying it from Jeff Bezos' sweatshop, and you'd prefer, that nobody had to piss in a bottle over the course of packaging or send it to you, there's Red Emma's, which is a worker-owned bookstore in Baltimore that you can order books from online. So that's redemmas.org.
Cool. No one's pissing in a bottle at Red Emma's unless they want to.
Yeah, I mean, if that's just what they wanted, like if they just prefer pissing in bottles to pissing in urinals, that's just like their thing, then I would assume that since it's harder to fire somebody from a co-op, they can probably do that if they want to. But I don't think anybody's doing it because they're worried about not making quota.
Yeah.
It's just freeing is all. You just don't have to go all the way to the bathroom. All right. All right. Let's do plugs and get the hell out of here. Anybody else got anything? Anders, go ahead.
You can cancel me at Andersley here on Twitter, Dursley1 on Instagram, and check out my other job, Redacted Tonight, which is on RT America. You can find it on YouTube and portable.tv.
Nice.
Alex Patek.
Follow me on twitter.com at Patek Jokes. I still didn't change it. And again, you can find and cancel Anders at Andersley here.
My handle on everything is at Feral Jokes. It's an anagram for my name. You can find me and cancel me. Odds are someone is already canceling me. You want to see my dick? You can Google me. My nudes are all over the internet. What else? We have merch. It's listed in the show notes, and we also have a Patreon. If you're a new listener and you don't know what that is, bonus episodes in Discord. Oh my God, only $5. Check it out. And
phone bank for Public Power, NYC, and Karishma Mehta also running to mix it up, not to New York. She's in Northern Virginia, running for delegate. DSA endorsed. Please phone bank and donate to her.
Oh yeah, shouts out to New York DSA Eco-Socialist Working Group, who we've been phone banking for and stuff for the Public Power campaign. They were on the show. Hey, guess what? The 21st of this month, May 2021, I'm doing live stand-up at some place called the Bee Cafe. This will be my first live show since the one I did last year. So come out and throw milkshakes at me and cancel me and yell at me. As long as you buy a ticket, I don't give a shit. All right. It's finished.
It's finished.